Today I would be giving you a small session on different type of sensors that are used in industry, a basic on their working principle and something on some application videos to show how these sensors are exactly used in the industry. So, these are some of the topics that I would be covering today, different type of sensors, their roles of sensors in automation, its importance, various sensing technology, family of sensors, and then maybe we can have an interactive session where you can have some queries related to some of the sensors, you can come and discuss with us. So, this is a common example, this has been used by most people who are giving presentation on automation. Human body is also having 5 sensors, like we are also having 5 sensors. So, very commonly they say that a fully automated machine can be given as an example of it is a human body. We have our 5 sensors for sensing, we have a brain which can be compared to a CPU, then we have hands and mechanical movements, our legs, which can be compared to actuators and motion systems. So, today one of the important components of automation, sensors, I would be discussing on some of them. What are sensors? Basically, sensors can be considered to be a physical device that converts a physical parameter into measurable signals. These signals can be either electrical signals, which can be measured in terms of digital input and output, input devices, or analog outputs. Now, physical parameter, change in physical parameter. For example, if we talk about an inductive sensor, its working principle is basically on electromagnetic field. The change in the field is being sensed here. So, that is what we call as a change in physical parameters. Similar to sensors, there are also transducers. They convert energy from one form into another form. So, this is a basic, a very minute small difference between the two technologies. So, if we talk about sensors, we are using sensors in every day, in our normal life also we are using sensors in everywhere. For example, in microwaves, they are temperature sensors for measuring the temperature. Even if you talk about ACs, ACs have a temperature sensor and humidity sensor. Based on the settings, it controls the cooling and the humidity of the room. Similarly, smoke detectors, air pressure sensors, even ATM machines, they do have sensors inside it. So, these are some of the sensors that we are using in daily life. But when we talk about sensors that are used in industry, they have a special type of protection. They have a special certifications that are required so as to make them, so as to help them to withstand high temperature, high pressure, high dust environments. So, that is why they have a different grade of sensors for that. So, this is something basic. What is the use of sensors? They help in automation, they help in giving the feedback to a mechanism, because you cannot have a complete system without a feedback. You have a mechanical system, it's actuating, it's moving forward, but how will you take a next act unless and until you know that some action has happened. So, the sensors give you a feedback, so that we take that feedback and based on that we control and do the next actions. So, this is some of the type of sensors that are there. We talk about sensors in factory automation, which we talk about general factories of process plants, then sensors for process industry. Basically, these are different types. We can talk about sensors like inductive, capacitive, magnetic, ultrasonic, photosensors, encoders, RFID based systems. And then there are sensors that are used in process automation like temperature sensors, pressure sensors, level sensors, flow sensors, humidity, pH level. So, these are two basic categories of sensors. I will have a brief on all of this. So, we will just start off with the very basic sensors we call as a proximity sensors. We will start off with a working principle, how they work, and then the basic construction of a sensor. Now, we have all studied about Lenz's law, right? What is Lenz's law? What does it say?
It always opposes the cost to which it can produce.
Right, sir.
Flux lines, right? That's the flux line.
Exactly. So, this is what the concept of an inductive sensor is. See, an inductive sensor, if you talk about the construction of a sensor, it consists of a coil. Then there is an oscillator circuit, trigger circuit, and an output device. Now, as you energize the sensor, the coil gets energized. Since the oscillator is vibrating at very high oscillating frequency, the coil gets energized and de-energized at very high frequency. As a result, electromagnetic field is produced. Now, if you have a target, let us say it is a metal target, it comes within that electromagnetic field, eddy current starts producing in it, that is what Lenz's law says. And these eddy currents, as the strength of this increases, as the target approaches the sensor, the strength increases and they start to oppose the magnetic field that caused it. So, based on that this inductive sensors work. So, if you see, these are the 4 parts. So, this is an oscillator in front, coil, detector circuit and an output circuit. Now, earlier if we say how this change in state is being captured, oscillator was oscillating at very high frequencies. Now, because of the eddy currents, the oscillator frequency is killed. That means the oscillator stops to oscillate. This change in state is captured by a trigger circuit and it generates an output. So, all inductive sensors we call as echo sensors, ECKO, that is eddy currents killed oscillations. Clear? So, as you can see, this is just a description. This is how the field is as the target approaches. This is totally killed, that means the electromagnetic field is not present anymore. This change of state is being captured and we get an output. So, these sensors, what we call as inductive sensors or proximity sensors commonly used, they come in different housings. They can be either cylindrical housing, either square shape or rectangular shape housing, slot or ring. So, these are different housing. Basic construction, basic working principle of all inductive sensors are same. It's only the housing that is changing, right. So, in cylindrical there are different housings M3, M4, M8, M12, M18. That means the diameter of the barrel inside which the sensor is enclosed is either cylindrical and the diameter say of the cylinder is 8, 18, 12, 30. It can change. Similarly, there are square shape sensors or rectangular sensors. So, these are all square shape sensors, different housing, different sizes. Again, a slot sensor, it is sort of a U shape. Any target that approaches within that U is being sensed. So, these are this is one of the housings that we call as slot type sensors. Then there are ring sensors. It's sort of a ring. Target has to go through it, that is a metal target, and as a metal target goes through it, the sensor senses and the field changes and we get an output. Now, some of the basic steps how to choose a sensor for an application, that is most important, because different applications require different type of sensor, different type of mounting environments, different outputs. Output has to be which type, connected to what type of a device. So, there are different criteria of there are some of the parameters or some of the criteria where we decide how to choose a right sensor. So, firstly it is the housing design based on the mechanical conditions, whether we can use a small sensor, a cylindrical sensor, a rectangular sensor, we choose which type of sensor to be used. Secondly, the most important factor is the sensing range of the sensor. If we have a target that is approximately around 10 mm at the distance of 10 mm, so we cannot choose a sensor with a smaller sensing distance. Then the electrical data, that is how we are going to connect the device to the take an input of this device. Either it has to be taken to a PLC. Now, if PLC supports PNP type of input or an NPN type of input, either it can be a NAMUR, AC, DC. Based on that, we decide either the sensor has to be electrical data and SS connections. And lastly, the frequency, that means the switching time of a sensor, how fast the device is moving in front of the sensor. Based on that, we decide the switching frequency of the sensor. So, these are some of the basic parameters. Now, now since, as I said, the sensor is consisting of a coil inside it and the electromagnetic field is being produced, the size of the sensor or the sensing distance of the sensor totally depends on certain factors, right. Firstly is the target size, then target composition and the mounting conditions, how we are mounting the sensor. So, we will just go one by one in each of these. Target size is the most important factor. Now, we have a small theoretical formula that we say that ideally a target size of the sensor should be equal to the diameter of the sensor. That means, if you are using an M18 sensor, the minimum target size should be 18 by 18 mm square and the thickness should be minimum 1 mm. Why we choose 1 mm? Because if we have using a thinner sheet, the eddy currents that are produced will not be able to kill the oscillations. That means that the oscillator will not be killed and we not get an output. So, these are some of the calculations that we do. For example, if we are using an 18 mm sensor, 18 mm diameter sensor and the sensing range of the sensor is 5 mm, we say it should 3 times sensing range is equal to 15 mm. That means, since the diameter is greater, so we go with the diameter. That means, the target should be 18 by 18. Second example is, if we have a sensor with 18 mm diameter, but sensing range is 8 mm. So, whichever is higher, that 3 times 8, that means 24 mm, that means we have to go by the target size of 24 by 24. But generally we say ideal target size should be equal to the diameter of the sensor, right sir? So, this is one of the important aspects, that is the target size. Secondly, the composition of the target. Generally all inductive sensors that are being designed are used using mild steel as a reference target. That means if the target is mild steel, the sensor will give you the sensing distance of 10 mm if it is designed for 10 mm. If the target changes, for example, it changes from mild steel to aluminum to stainless steel, the sensing distance will get reduced. So, these are the reduction factor by which the sensing distance will get reduced. For example, a copper will give you a sensing distance of 3 point reduction factor of 0.3. That means a 10 mm sensor will not give you 10 mm sensing distance, the sensing distance will get reduced to 3 mm. Can anybody please share why is it so? Why we are not getting a 10 mm sensing distance with copper as a target or brass as a target? Sir?
Conductivity and material property.
Exactly, the ferrous content of the material, right? So, this is the most important factor. And lastly, the mounting, how we are mounting a sensor. The sensor has to be mounted in such a way that it should not sense the target or it should not sense the mounting bracket on which it is mounted. So, these are some of the criteria, like if you are mounting two sensors, the minimum distance has to be maintained, because if the distance is not there, the two sensors will interfere with each other and we can get false triggering or false outputs. So, these are two types, like if you are using a flush type of a sensor, the sensing distance should be the distance between the two sensors should be 1 times the diameter. That means if 18 mm is a sensor diameter, 18, then there should be a gap of minimum 18 mm and then the second sensor can be mounted. If we are using a non-flush sensor, then 3 times the diameter is the distance between the two sensors. So, this is the distance between the two sensors and 3 times the diameter of the sensor. That is the distance this is the distance between which two sensors has to be mounted. Below that we cannot use it, right, because they will interfere with each other. Now, if we talk about the electromagnetic field, how it's been produced, if we talk about a flush sensor, I'll just show you in the lab session. I'll show you both type of sensors, flush as well as non-flush, to just give you an idea. If you see, this is the first one is the flush sensor. The field that is produced is somewhere guided, it's shielded, it's only in the front portion of the sensor, it's not on the sides of the sensor. Unshielded sensor on the other hand is not shielded throughout the end. You have a plastic protrusion in front of it. That means the sensing that the electromagnetic field is from the sides. So, in case any target comes from the sides, it will also sense. And then lastly, there is a third type of sensor, it is called as quasi flush. It is not totally flush, but it is a small protrusion is there. So, these are basic installation conditions. Now, as I said, electrical connections are also important. The sensors can either be connected, the device can either use an AC sensor or it can also be a DC sensor. That means you have to decide based on this. So, the sensors are available in different categories. It can either be from 20 to 250 volt AC or from 8 to 60 volt DC. Again, all type of outputs, it can be either PNP, NPN. I think everybody here is aware of PNP and NPN, right sir? Again, NO-NC contacts, it can be either NO contact or it can be a NC contact. Then 2-wire sensors, these are all different electrical connections. So, 2-wire sensors again we cannot, we have to use a load across the output. One of the important aspects of 2-wire sensor, it can be used as a NPN as well as a PNP. Can you tell me how it can be used so? But how we can use a 2-wire sensor as a NPN sensor as well as a PNP sensor? Hanji sir? Reversing the connection, but how as an output? For example, जैसे आपने यहाँ पे 24 वोल्ट दिया सप्लाई, राइट, आउटपुट आपको 24 वोल्ट मिला, दैट मीन्स ऑन द आउटसाइड आउटपुट साइड यू हैव अ लोड, लोड के अक्रॉस आपने नेगेटिव दिया. सो इट एक्ट्स एज अ पीएनपी बिकॉज 24 वोल्ट एज अ सोर्स सप्लाई हो रहा है लोड को लिए, राइट. अगर हम इसका कनेक्शन उल्टा कर देते हैं, नेगेटिव देते हैं, आपने यहाँ पे सप्लाई नेगेटिव वोल्टेज दिया, सेंसर ने जब कॉन्टैक्ट चेंज किया नेगेटिव आउटपुट आया, यानी कि लोड के दूसरी तरफ आपको पॉजिटिव देना पड़ेगा. सो 2-wire sensor can be used as a NPN as well as a PNP. जनरली लोग NPN PNP दोनों कॉन्सेप्ट कह रहे हैं. दिस इज हाउ इट इज, राइट. Again 3-wire, same all combination, it can be PNP, it can be NPN, NO, NC, all type of outputs are there. It can also have a 4-wire sensor. 4-wire ke andar there is a possibility you can use NO NC contact together, and it can be PNP sensor. That means a PNP sensor with NO NC contact or an NPN sensor with NO NC contact. AC sensors, certain sensors are AC DC both. That means they can support both AC as well supply as well as DC supply. So these are just different type of connections. I'll just quickly go over some. Then this is again an AC sensor. So I'll just show you a couple of videos to show you how these sensors are used in industry. For example, this is an application of a material flow. Here we have a conveyor, and there is a target. There are components moving across it, and we need to take decision. So these sensors are mounted at the bottom of the conveyor, and it has to sense the metal target. Again, based on that, it can do sorting, passing forward, or anything. So these are all some basic sensors. Now there are certain applications in the industry where you require sensors which have some special features, right? As I said, industry may not have mild steel as a target every time. The target can change. It can be mild steel, it can be stainless steel, it can be brass or a copper. Then for that purpose, there are sensors which should give the sensing distance of 10 mm, for example, with all type of targets. So those sensors are called reduction factor 1 sensors. That means irrespective of the target composition, the sensing distance will always remain the same. Aapka component can change from brass, copper, mild steel, stainless steel, anything. You don't need to change the sensor. The same sensor will give you the same sensing distance. Right. Then there are certain sensors or certain applications which require high temperature areas. We cannot mount a normal sensor inside an oven because the temperature inside an oven is very high. It can go up to 200 degrees, 200, 300 degrees. For that, there are special sensors that are called as high temperature sensors. Those sensors can withstand high temperatures up to 200, 300 degrees. The concept is, as I said, the sensor consists of 4 basic components: coil, oscillator circuit, a trigger circuit, and an output device. That means the coil, which can withstand high temperature, is kept in a high temperature zone, and the oscillator circuit, which is the secondary part of the structure, that is kept in a different housing. That means we put the coil inside the high temperature zone and we keep the oscillator at the room temperature. So that means an inductive sensor can also be made to work at high temperature applications. Then there are certain sensors like weld immune sensors. Welding, as we all know, produces a lot of noise, and this noise interferes with the control signal. Now these sensors are so designed that they can withstand the welding splatters. I just have a video of this. So these sensors can withstand welding splatters because the EMF, electromagnetic interference, that is being produced during the welding application is quite high. So they have to sustain that, plus they have to, the body of the sensor is so designed that it will withstand the splatters. That means the splatters will not get stuck onto the sensing head and it will not damage the sensor as such. So they are, these sensors are known as weld immune sensors. They are immune to welding applications. So this is an example of a welding application, the robot carrying a welding probe, and it is supposed to measure the length of that welding rod. So if the rod gets reduced by a few mm or few millimeters, we get an output and we can change the rod. So this is again an inductive sensor, and this is the welding probe. It's measuring the length, it's sensing the length. As the length gets reduced, we don't get an output, and based on that we can change. Then so this was something about sensors of inductive type, right? Now if you have any queries related to inductive, then we can move ahead. Else.
You said same sensor for all the distances.
Yes.
This thing, conductivity is compensated in that case.
Which one, sir?
Conductivity, how is compensated?
So inside the sensor there are 2 cores are there. It's not the it's working on the air coil. It's not having a metallic coil inside it. It's just a coil with a air inside gap, and these are two coils inside the sensor. These two coils as a compensation. One coil is providing the field, the second coil is acting as a compensation. So, in case of the target, the eddy currents which are produced, the oscillations are producing being of the same magnitude. So, it compensates that thing.
If I may interject,
Yeah, sure.
with your permission. It so happens that most of the inductive sensors have a ferrite core coil, and that's a very generic type. If the eddy current is strengthening enough to kill the field, the oscillator needs more current to sustain. And that internal circuitry is very fine. It's with an op-amp. If the current demand of an oscillator increases, you switch. So your very nice question, it is not a question of conductivity, but permittivity towards eddy current when the material type changes. So instead of a generic ferrite coil, you have a air core coil, and not one coil, but two coils. In which case, under a zero condition, the strength of the field of the exciter coil is sensed by the receiver coil, for example. That is in a dynamic calibration as far as the op-amp is concerned. As soon as you have a metal of different permittivity, whatever it might be, some sort of attenuation would happen. And that attenuation would be different than when you are bringing plastic, when you are bringing wood, because the metal, the range of permittivity of metal will still be under a certain band. And these two coils are tuned accordingly. So instead of a generic coil, you get two coils, and it has been so much, I would say, of consequence, because most of the material kinds in modern manufacturing are no more ferrous, but a lot of alloys, including a lot of aluminum. Like if we go to automotive plant, entire engine plant, 90% of the components in engine plant are aluminium or alloy aluminium castings. To compensate, the sensors would have to get very, very close to the material being detected, and they will get damaged. So this permittivity, this, I would say, innovation in sensing the differential field would help that.
Then we can move ahead with next type of proximity sensors, because proximity is a word that is being used. The reason is that they are not touching the target, they are in close proximity to the target. So even capacitive sensors are there. So the basic principle of capacitive sensor is they are used for application where there are non-metallic targets. For example, wood, oil, water, level detection of granular materials, grains, other things. Now, if you look at the construction of the sensor, the sensing phase of the sensor acts as a plate of a capacitor. The target acts as the second plate. Then again there is an oscillator circuit inside it, a trigger circuit, and an output device. In case of inductive sensors, as I said, as the target approaches, the electromagnetic field gets killed. In this case, the capacitor, the target acts as the second plate. As the target approaches, there is a change in the dielectric field. As a result of that, the oscillation starts to oscillate, the oscillator inside the sensor starts to oscillate. This change in state is measured, and we get an output for that. That means its working principle is totally opposite to that of an inductive principle. Now, if we all know the basic formula of capacitance is area gap into dielectric divided by the distance. The only parameter that is basically changing is the distance. The dielectric can be the air, second plate can be the target, area of the target is same, only this thing is there is a distance that is changing, right. Now, they are basically used for a lot of applications. For example, if you go for a packaging industry, simplest example I would be saying is, we all taken Maggi noodles, right. So, it is packed inside a small package. Now, sometimes during packing what happens is, the Maggi noodle packet, the sachet is not inside it, and the packet gets sealed because of the air gap. Now, that air gap cannot be detected using an inductive sensor or a photo sensor unless and until you have a weighing based system. So, for that purpose they use a small capacitive sensor. The capacitive sensor acts as one plate, and the air gap, that is a hollow gap, that can be used to get the target as to detect whether the pouch is empty or filled up. Again, for example, for applications like bottling plants, now you cannot detect the level or whether the bottle is filled or empty using a normal inductive sensor or a photo sensor, because the light can pass through it. So, for this type of applications they use capacitive sensors. Any type of food packaging industry, they basically use capacitive, measuring the level inside a hopper. For example, in the chocolate industry or a chocolate plant, these are hoppers. Hoppers have chocolate, liquid chocolate. Now, you cannot measure the level of a chocolate without seeing it. So, for that, on the outside body of a hopper, you have this capacitive sensor. As long as the dielectric is different, it can measure that level. It can give an output. If the level goes down, it can give an output, and you can refill the level. So, for a lot of applications where the targets are non-metallic, capacitive sensors are being used. Just see if I have a video of it, but no, sorry, I am not having any video of the capacitive sensor, but these are some of the applications like detection of level inside a bottle, whether the bottle is half filled, full filled, empty, or sometimes detection of pouches, whether it's filled or empty pouches, right. Magnetic sensors, again they are also similar to what inductive and capacitive sensors are, but they are supposed to sense the presence of magnetic field. That means the magnetic field has to be there, and they sense the magnetic field, and based on that they give an output. The magnetic field can be either produced through a permanent magnet or it can be through a electromagnet, right. These sensors both, if you talk about magnetic sensors, very rarely used in industry. They are basically used in flow measurements. The flow meters, they have these magnets. As they are rotating, the magnet is getting sensed, and we get the flow, whether there is a flow inside the plant or not, whether the flow inside the liquid flow is there or not. So, very few applications for magnetic sensors. We will move on to next type of sensors we call as ultrasonic sensors. Now, we all know that ultrasonic sensor consists of a transducer inside it. The transducer produces sound waves. These sound waves move and they get reflected back by the target. So, this is just the construction. This is a transducer, there is a signal processor, and then there is an output stage. The transducer produces sound waves. These sound waves get hit, reflected back by the target, and the signal processor compares the sound intensity, and based on that we produce an output. Now, if we talk about ultrasonic sensors, these are some of the features. Like all inductive sensors, they have certain limitations. They are totally dependent on the target. It has to be a metallic target, right. They cannot sense wood. Capacitive sensors, again it can sense wood or non-metallic targets, but the sensing distance is quite reduced. Ultrasonic sensors are now widely used in industry because of it has overcome all these limitations. If you talk about inductive, we can only go up to a certain distance. We cannot go a distance beyond a certain limit, that is more than 100 mm. If we talk about capacitive sensors, again 50 mm, 60 mm, that is the maximum sensing distance that we can get in capacitive sensors. In ultrasonic sensors, we can go up to a larger distance. The distance can go up to few meters. Then again, it is not dependent upon the type of target, not the color of the target, the content of the target, or a material of the target. Any target which is sound reflecting can be sensed using an ultrasonic sensor. It is not dependent on the color as such. That means it is color neutral. You can have target of any color. Then soiling proof. That means the sensing head of the sensor will not get damaged easily, because the sound waves keep cleaning the sensing face. That means dust will not accumulate on the head of the sensor. Then these are some of the benefits, right. Then basic application, if we talk about ultrasonic sensor, is for level measurement. You have a water level tank, you want to measure the level of the tank, you mount the ultrasonic sensor on top of it. As the level goes down, you can get a switch output for that, and you can start refilling the tank all over again. These are some of the drawbacks if we talk about them. Temperature and humidity. With change in temperature, the sound waves change. We all know ultrasonic sensors are working on the principle of sound. That means the sound waves are reflected back from the target. We know the frequency, we know the velocity of sound, that is 344 meters per second. That is the speed of the sound, and the time taken for the sound to travel and come back. So, based on that we calculate the distance, right. Now, as the temperature changes, the velocity of the sound also change. That means at certain temperature the sound velocity is, for example, if we say this is an example, right, at minus 25 degrees the velocity of sound is 316 meters per second. Then at 70 degrees the sound velocity changes to 371 meters per second. Now, if the target was at a distance of 1 meter, because of the change in temperature, the target would get a different distance measurement, right, because of the change in temperature. Now, certain sensors are also available which have a thermistor inside it. That means it can do the compensation. It will measure the temperature around, and based on that it will produce the sound waves. Then we can calculate that this is the velocity of sound at this temperature, and based on that this is the compensation that has to done, and give you a most accurate reading. Clear? So, temperature influences can still be reduced by using a temperature compensating thermistor inside a sensor.
In case of non-uniform temperature,
Sorry?
in case of non-uniform temperature, right? For example, sensor is present somewhere else. In that part, temperature is different. That part we are sensing. That
Sensing
different temperature.
distance कितना है आपका what is the distance, like it can go up to 10 meters. How the two temperature distance can be different, like यहाँ पे आपका अलग temperature and you are saying that temperature जो है atmosphere temperature जो around the sensor है, it's going to measure that temperature. Yeah.
Otherwise, in that case, if we go 10 meters beyond that, then the same temperature is there.
Yeah. So उसके अंदर जो thermistor है that will compensate with the temperature for that particular area. Then one of the important factor is this ultrasonic sound is not a single beam. It's like a parabola. It's like a balloon shape. So if you can see, this is the calculation. It says 2 times tan 5 degrees. That means the degree of opening angle of the sound cone is something like at 5 degrees. That means at a distance of 6 meters, the sound cone would be as large as 1.5 meters or 1.4 meters, right? So there are certain sensors, ultrasonic sensors, through which we can compensate, we can adjust the sound cone, and the sound cone can get reduced to almost 90% of what is there. That means instead of 1 meter, the sound cone would be around 200 mm, 300 mm. Then these are different types again. There are direct detection sensors, there are through beam type, and there is a special sensor which we call as a double sheet detector. That means in printing industry or in metal industry, there is a press. Either it's printing something on a paper. Now, if 2 sheets go inside, it has to be stopped so that you are not wasting the sheet. So there are sensors which are through beam type of ultrasonic, which can detect a single sheet, a double sheet, and no sheet. I'll just show you a video of that also. These are some of the outputs. I'll just not go into the details. We have switch outputs. These sensors have analog outputs 4 to 20 for continuous measurement. Then hysteresis mode, that means you can teach field monitoring. These are all type of outputs of these sensors. I'll just show you a couple of videos. One of the common application that is being used where these sensors are used are for level measurement. So again, this is supposed to detect whether that packet is there, the pouch is not empty or not. Now, because of the target inside the pouch, the sound waves that are being received by the receiver, the amplitude gets reduced as compared to in case of an empty pouch. So, the amplitude is being measured, and based on that we can get an output. So, this
The action when the pouch is empty,
so it can give an output, it can stop.
it stops.
It will, that is the control parts. You can get an output from the sensor.
You would see that there's a pneumatic cylinder.
So that cylinder,
As soon as the sensor receiver, the positioning system says the target is there. An ultrasonic sensor gives an output which is non-conforming output. The pneumatic cylinder is made to actuate, it will eject that pouch out of the line.
There's a picture here, you can see it. If you go back, you can see it being
Just rewind little bit, I think that action is there.
it is there.
Let's just go back.
Empty pouch is low now.
Just go back. That's all. I just see that. This one. Even actuator is not there, just blowing here.
But a very interesting
Empty packet,
incident
empty packet.
to tell you, one of the very renowned companies in Punjab, they said, why should I spend the money? I can have a high speed fan. If the pouch is filled, it will not blow away, the empty pouch will blow away. I said, okay, you don't need it, but for that moment, that's as good as when you have a separated packaging entity. But in mass production plant, in form sealing, everything is connected to the subsequent pouch. Suppose you have Maggi. When Maggi is being produced, it's a very big film. And these films are unwinding, the forming is happened, the sealing is happened, the cutting is happened. And it's in a form, as you have seen some chips, Lay's chips, everything is connected with each other. So the same person had to buy a sensor because the fan didn't work. The only sensor that worked was ultrasonic sensor or a capacitive sensor. So there are ways around it.
So now this is an example of how in printing industry you can use this sensor for detection of double sheets. So this is an example not of a press, right? Again in press, the press is supposed to put pressure and give a shape to the sheet. Now if the two sheets are fed, the tool can get damaged. So to prevent that, an ultrasonic sensor, as a through beam type of a sensor, is mounted. So the sound waves get reflected from one surface, that is one sheet, then there is an air gap, and then the second sheet. The sound waves get reflected from the second sheet as well. The amplitude of sound that is being received by the receiver is quite less as compared to that is being received through a single sheet. So based on the two amplitudes, we can compare whether there was a single sheet or a double sheet or no sheet.
We would also like to know what control action does it take place once it gets to know like there is a double sheet, then what exactly happens after that?
Ma'am, it can happen. There are different ways of doing it. There can be a mechanical system, maybe a pneumatic system, pneumatic gripper, or a vacuum gripper. It can it can pick that one sheet and discard it.
Can there be any circumstance where there is a false alarm also? Any
False-
exceptional case, for example, there are not actually two sheets, but maybe
There, I have come across some applications where this had happened. It was because on all of the sheets they put a lamination, and because of lamination, the lamination was not uniform. There were certain air gaps inside it, and as a result of that air gaps, it was always detecting two sheets, even if there was a single sheet. So certain limitations are there always.
And maybe also, sir, after some time, if there is some problem with the sensors, there is some moisture or other things.
Yes, again, yeah, exactly, sir.
Do you have self-diagnostics in the sensors?
These are every time you are made to detect a double sheet, you see, anytime on a commercial entity, the sensors are made for a wide usage. So these through beam sensors, whatever media, and there is a bottom limit and there is a top limit of density. Sender and receiver are tuned or calibrated to the media they have to sense. The air gap here is the biggest attenuator. It is not the thickness, but it is inclusion of the air gap, that is the attenuating factor. So any air gap, due to whatever reason might come along, it is transgressing the physical aspect for which it is being designed. So sensor might be working perfectly okay. Come around moisture or anything, I would say in practical sense of the word, in a very, very high speed and high production plant, once a week or once a month, depending on the intensity of the material being detected, you may need to maintain it. You may need to maintain it.
Second thing, sir, we also use this same ultrasonic for detecting the flaws or any crack in metal also. Because sir, if there is some crack, air is there, so again sir, we can say that there is some.
If I may quickly add on that. Now, the air gaps and cracks and analysis, whatever you are trying to measure, the media with which any measurement has to happen has to be better on the physical properties of the media being measured. Here, the wavelength of the ultrasonic waves determine the permeability. You know the refractive index, optical index. Similarly, other radiations including low frequency ultrasonic waves have a certain permittivity depending on the porosity of the material and likewise. So come to cracks on metals. Ultrasonic waves, by the physical aspect of their wavelength, if you take their refractive index, how wavelength and refractive index are related, will not be able to permeate through metals. Transform that to X-rays. Transform such a system to X-rays, you will have systems in which X-rays, where the wavelength of the X-ray is able to give you that permittivity into that thickness of the material. So, material crack detection is essentially done by high frequency.
So I would like to ask one question about the capacitive sensors. One of the application where we use these sensors is agriculture. What we do is that we take one parallel plate capacitor and in between the dielectric material we take those grains. And this is for the detection of the moisture basically. With the change in the moisture, the dielectric constant will change and accordingly capacitance and hence moisture can be calibrated. Now when in a capacitance the dielectric material is uniform, then it's fine. But since grains they are of different sizes and also because of that there is an air gap between the grains themselves as well as the between the walls. So there is some capacitance because of that also. So in such cases,
Fantastic.
how should that be
Very
compensated?
nice question. I really appreciate it. In inductive sensors, you will never be able to tune a sensor because the oscillation, frequency, etc. are fixed. In 99% of the capacitive sensor, you will be able to tune the capacitor to the media of which dielectric constant is having an effect. Especially air and moisture, because moisture, water, is the biggest defining factor in change in dielectric strength. So, depending on your grain separation, suppose you have a grain flowing and you want to control the moisture, that certain grains which do not or carry more than certain amount of moisture content with them should not be going forward in the packaging line. So you tune your capacitive sensor to the most critical aspect, NO or NC, whichever way your actuator has to work, so that slightest increase in moisture content beyond the point of inflection, your cylinders will start working, your alternative lines will come into play to differentiate between what goes on into X amount of moisture and what goes on with the Y amount.
Yeah, that is where I'm interested in how to tune the capacitor in such case. How that tuning done?
Any commercial capacitive sensor for that matter, I think you will see one, will come with a very fine adjustment, manual adjustment available. You can do that. For another grade of sensors which are microprocessor controlled, that thing is very, I would say, programmable.
That is what I'm working on.
Fantastic clap.
Okay, now we can move ahead with the next type of sensors, photoelectric sensors. These are very commonly used. They are again used for the purpose of detection, presence or absence of an object, and also for distance measurement. So this is a electromagnetic spectrum. So we are basically working on visible range, that is somewhere around 600 to 700 nanometers. If we say about working principle of an photoelectric sensor, it consists of a transmitter and a receiver, that is an LED. The lights get out of the sensor, it gets reflected back from the target, and based on the light that has been received, we amplify. There is an amplifier inside the sensor, it amplifies the light with a generator and then calculates the intensity, and based on that we design whether there was a target or not. So if you look, this is the internal construction, transmitter, receiver, again an oscillator circuit, because these light waves are never a single beam, they are very high frequency beams, and it's not it's a modulated beam. So it can be switching at very high frequency, so it feels like it's a single beam of light. There is a signal converter and then again an output device. Now output again can be anything. Now there are different type of sensors for that. This is one of the concept that is being used.
Can you just ask them why it is modulated? And let them explain how why it is modulation required there.
Okay. Can you please?
So they start sleeping. I can sense from here. You have to ask them. So then only they will be working. Yeah, this one. So just put the same question what I just.
Okay, now as I said, we do not send a single beam of light. We are sending pulses, right? And why is it so?
Sir, actually, whatever we have, if it is a big signal, its modulation, we also use some carrier waves which is strong signal, so that at the output we get some signal and we can again filter it and we can detect some signals. Modulation is, I think.
And are you doing this in the optical actually? That is more common in electromagnetic.
Yeah.
In sensors also it's being done, sir. In photoelectric sensors never been a single beam, because if there is a single beam, there is a possibility of the beam get because of noise or dust can interfere with the signal. So there are multiple pulses and they are going at very high frequency. And if you look, it looks like a single beam, but they are all pulses. So even if the single pulse gets obstructed, there are multiple pulses following it, which can still give you a feedback.
Let me extend the question or give you a hint. The light from the sun, is it continuous analog or is it pulsating?
It is pulsating.
The light from sun is pulsating. Is it switching on and off at a very high frequency?
No, from sun it is continuous, so that may activate this if it is.
Thank you. There lies the answer.
Yes, yes.
Because suppose my LED is switching at 20 kilohertz, my receiver will be tuned to receive the light exactly at 20 kilohertz, not even 19.9, because its primary job is to see the signal reflected back from the target so chosen and not get disturbed by any other light of any other frequency or any other strength. And so what I transmit, it will get signed by the target and it will return in that frequency only, and that's what I would see. And even two sensors sitting side by side, as Dr. Jha is provoking everybody to think, two sensors working side by side, light from one may get into the other, both are at 20 kilohertz. So mind it, no two sensors are switched at the same frequency. In our production line, every sensor is slightly tweaked to go straight. Maybe once in a blue moon, in different production lots, some frequency may be same numerically. But no two sensors would be switching at same frequency ever.
So as in inductive sensors or any sensors, we have contacts, we say NO-NC contact. Similar to this, in photoelectric sensors, we say light on, dark on, right? That means if the output is triggered, that means only when the light is falling on the receiver, we say it says light on. If the output is triggered when there is no light on the receiver, we call it as a dark on. That means if you have a through beam sensor, now through beam sensors, there are two housings, one is having a transmitter, the second housing is having a receiver. That means that light from the transmitter is going on to a receiver. If that light is obstructed, that means there is no light on the receiver, and then we get an output, right. So based on that concept only, if the receiver, that means the second housing, if it's receiving the light and output is on, that means there is no target in between it, we call it as a NC mode. So in photoelectrics, we say it as light on, or the other way around, dark on. So this is the same concept, but in a different manner, based on the receiver, whether it's receiving the light or not. So these are different housings in photoelectric sensor. The basic concept, basic working principle is always the same. So if you talk about true beam sensor, there are two housings, one is having a transmitter, the second housing is having a receiver. The light from the transmitter goes to a receiver. If the light gets obstructed, we get an output, right. Second type of sensors we call as retroreflective sensors. That means a single sensor will have a transmitter as well as a reflector, a receiver, and you need to have a reflector in front of it. That means the light has to get reflected back from the reflector. Again, anything that obstructs the light from falling back will get an output. Now, if I may ask, if for example, we bring a shiny object in front of it, light will get reflected back to the sensor, will we still get an output or not? Is it possible? Means will it obstruct the working of a sensor? So that means if we have a sensor here and a reflector, and if I bring a mirror in front,
Both the sensors on the same side of the vessel.
no sir, these are second category of sensor, that is a retroreflective sensor. उसमें we require a reflector in front of it. That means this is my sensor, this is a reflector. The light from the sensor is going to the reflector and getting reflected back. Now if I don't have a reflector, and in middle, if I bring in something like a mirror or a very shiny surface that can reflect back the light, will it still the sensor will get an output, or what, will it be able to sense it or not?
No, it won't, because reflected light here is of different frequency. Slightly it changes a bit.
No, the distance will be distance change.
It has not, sorry, it has nothing to do with the distance. It's basically, if we say, we call it, we use a principle of polarization in light.
Polarization.
That means the light that is going to the sensor is in one axis, the light getting reflected back is in second axis. That means even if you have a reflective surface in between, it will not be reflecting the light in the same pattern that is supposed to be received. So even if a shiny surface comes in between, it will not reflect, it can still be detected.
Say like if it is not through beam, I want to measure length on between the etchings and the light falls and then the sensor senses the light.
Through beam. So both that is the third category that we call as a direct detection sensor. These are different sensors. Like again, we talk about sensor through beam. That means the sensor will only have one transmitter, and the second sensor will have a receiving LED. But in case of direct detection, इसमें there is the same thing. Light will fall on the surface, will get reflected back, and it will be received by the receiver. Now, since we are talking about direct detection, the most important factor in direct detection is totally dependent upon the color of the target. We all know white to black color. Like white color will reflect almost all the light, black color will absorb all the light, right? So any photo sensor that is being designed is designed using Kodak paper, जो हम photo prints निकालते हैं, as a reference target. That is a white color because it has a maximum reflectivity, that is 90%. So if you are using a direct detection sensor and the target color changes from white to black, the sensing distance will also get affected. So for that purpose, there is a sensitivity adjustment inside it that can adjust according to the color of the target. Then there are certain sensors we call as slot sensors or U-shaped sensors. Again, inside the sensor there is a transmitter, there is a receiver. Then if you have an array of transmitters in one housing and an array of receivers on the other housing, those are called as light grids. आप lifts में देखते होंगे, lifts they all put light grids inside it. The moment you push your hand inside, the lift door will open because they have something like a grid inside it. Then these are special sensors we call as background suppression. If you talk about packaging industry, the material that is supposed to be used is stainless steel. You cannot use mild steel as a target, as a convey for a material as a for a conveyors. Now, if you have a component, if you have a biscuit packet or a biscuit moving on a shiny conveyor, there is a possibility that the light will get reflected back and it will give you false sensing. For that purpose, there are sensors called as background suppression sensors. That means, if this is the height of the target, it will suppress anything below that. That means, it will only sense the target and not the background. That means, even if there is a shiny surface, it will not sense it. So, these are all different type of photoelectric sensors. So, these are some of the factors, like through beam you can go up to longer distances of 300 meters. Some disadvantages associated with it, that as you go longer distance, alignment becomes a problem. I will just show you a video of a through beam sensor. It is a slot type sensor, it is a U-shaped sensor. That means, inside the sensor itself there is a transmitter as well as a receiver. So, it is supposed to sense the needle. Well, through beam hai, as the needle passes by, it gives an output and it drops the needle into the packet. Again, then these are some of the applications. It can be used on conveyors for counting of objects, for pattern detection. It can again be used for different applications. Then retroreflective sensors, as I said, it requires a reflector. The maximum distance you can go up to is 42 meters. Only drawback is if the reflector becomes dirty or soiled, you will still get an output. That means it will sense that there is something in between, and you, as reflector is not reflecting the light. That means you need to clean the reflector every time. Then again I will just show you a quick video about this. So, this is again a conveyor. You have this sensor on one side and the reflector on the other side. As this pallet is going, it has supposed to sense this pallet. Now, these are different type of retroreflective sensors. There is a fine beam retroreflective sensor, that means only a fine beam is going and hitting the reflector and coming back. It does have a drawback, because if the components are not uniform, that is like it's what's happening here. So, for that there are there is a retroreflective sensor which has a band of beam. That means there are multiple transmitters inside it and multiple receivers inside it. So, it forms like a band. The band goes and gets reflected back. So, even if the target is not uniform, it will still count 1. That means you will still get a proper output. So, it can be anything. It can be vibrating component, it can be any type of a component. So, we have done one application for an industry where they was supposed to detect a spring, right. So, spring cannot be detected using a normal through beam or a retroreflective sensor. For that you need a wide band sensor, and this was the sensor that was able to do that, was able to detect the spring. Then as I said, polarization. So, this is what happens, the light is going in one axis, is getting reflected back in a different axis. That means even if a shiny surface comes in between it, it will not give a false output, even it will not allow the light to come back. Then diffuse sensors, again as I said, they detect the object directly. That means the light falls on the object, it gets reflected back. It is totally dependent upon the color of the object. A white color will reflect maximum light as compared to a black color object. We can adjust the sensitivity using a potentiometer on the sensor. And then this is the background suppression. For example, this was the target to be detected and this was the background, that was a shinier surface. So, we can adjust the sensor so that it detects in this particular area and not beyond that area. That means we are suppressing the lower portion and we are only making it work in the upper portion. So, we call that as a background suppression sensor. Then similar to this concept, there are sensors called as background evaluation. That means it is using a background as a reference. That means the light sensor is being taught using a background as a reference. If any target comes in between, the light will not be reflected back in the same pattern as it was being reflected back from the background. So, these are two different concepts, background suppression and background evaluation. Again, it is the same concept as background suppression, it is a convergent beam. That means the beams are made to fall at a certain angle. Anything beyond or below that, before that will not be detected. Then there are certain special sensors which call as color sensors or contrast sensors, fiber optics and light curtain, and distance measurement. Color sensors, again any color that is formed using three basic colors, right. So, the sensor inside this has 3 LEDs RGB. The light gets reflected back from the target. The RGB content of that target is measured and stored inside the sensor. Now, every time a new component comes, it measures the RGB content, compares it with what is stored, and gives and decides whether it was the same color or a different color. Basically used in pharmaceutical industries where different tablets are moving. So, you need to sense and ensure that it goes in a proper way. Again, contrast sensors, packet materials you must have seen, there is a black mark on top of it, we call that as a eye mark. So, it is supposed to send the black mark, so that the servo systems can take do the cutting of the pouch. So, we call this as a eye mark sensor or a contrast sensor. It is working on the principle of change in contrast of the target. That means the black color is the contrast and the background is of a lower contrast. So, change in the contrast ratio will give an output. As I said, color sensors, right. So, this can be used for detection of different colors. I will just show you a video of this. So, this is like a complete video of a FFS machine. In packaging line we call it as a form, fill and seal. So, they are using all type of sensors here. So, this is the diameter of the roll. So, you can detect the diameter of the roll, you have a reflector on other end, you have a sensor. As the diameter goes down, the reflector will sense the light back. So, based on that you can decide whether new diameter roll has to be used. Then this is known as a splice, two joints. This is the eye mark. As you can see the black spot on this, this is the eye mark. This is where the sealing has to happen. So this is a video which shows all type of sensors that we have discussed together used in forming of one machine. So this is the filling application. Now we have this silo, and this silo is having some granules. Now we need to measure the level. For that you have ultrasonic sensors are mounted on top. It's measuring the level of the silo. As the level goes down, that means we need to do the refilling. This is for empty pouch detection, right? As there was air or anything, it can get detected. Again, this is a background suppression sensor that's not supposed to sense the background, it's only sensing the back on the top. So this was just a video of showing how inductive, photo, ultrasonics, capacitive sensors together are used in this machine, which is known as an FFS machine, form, fill and seal machine. So then there are certain sensors for luminescence detection, जो हम glue marks, chalks which are not visible through a normal way. Normally we can use luminescence sensor for that. That means this sensor generates a ultraviolet lamp inside it. It generates a light. That light, as it falls on the surface, the luminous marks gets it will reflect the light, which is a form of a visible light. So the receiver will receive it and will give you an output. So basically used for measurement in for glues, chalks, which are not visible to a normal eye. This is the principle of its working. Then there are certain fiber optic sensors. Again, it's again the same concept. There is an amplifier, and you have to connect a fiber to it. A fiber can be a through beam fiber or it can be a diffuse fiber. So there are different type of fibers, plastic fiber and a glass fiber. A glass fiber generally has a metallic lamination on top of it, so it can withstand high temperature. A plastic fiber cannot work in high temperature areas. Concept wise is similar to what a diffuse or a normal photosensor would do. Then again light curtains, as I said, these are all grids. These are transmitters here and receivers here. These light curtains which are used for safety purposes. That means an operator should not get any type of accident should happen to an operator. So for that there are certain type of sensors which are certified accordingly. So there are different type of certifications, type 2, type 4. That means the sensor is monitoring itself for fault conditions. If the sensor goes into a fault mode, it will stop the sensor, it will stop the machine instantly. That means it's monitoring not only the output as well as it's monitoring the input of the sensor. That means it's monitoring its own health. If any of the transducer or any of the LEDs inside the sensor goes faulty, it will go into a safe mode. It will generate an output which is a fault output, so that the machine can be stopped. So this is an example of a light grid. So this is a number of transmitters on one side and receivers on the other side. So it can be used for different applications, like detection is one of them. This is an application where you are detecting the overhang, something hanging out of the component. This is again for height checking. You have different height cartons moving on a conveyor. Now you want to have a different output for different cartons heights, so that you can do the sorting. So the sensor can detect different heights and give you different outputs. So the different heights can be taught. So this is just a teaching method. So this is just a video. I'll just go ahead, move ahead with this. Now there are again sensors which are, as I said, photoelectric sensors can also be used for distance measurement. That means the sensor inside, they have a laser light. It's using the principle of the speed of light, time of flight principle. That means the light that is reflected back, the time taken by the light to come back to us. Based on that, we calculate the distance of the target from the sensor. So these are different principles: triangulation, time of flight principle. Again, in consider, if you talk about time of flight, there are two principles inside it: phase correlation, PRT technology. Again, PRT means pulse ranging technology. That means you are sending short pulses of high frequency at a very high frequency. You are sending pulses at very high frequency, and you are measuring the time by which they get reflected back. So these are different concepts. I will not go in detail. I will just show you a couple of videos of the sensor. So again, this is showing how you can be used for counting purpose. Again, it's a photoelectric sensor with a transmitter and receiver. And on the other side, you have a reflector. So the light is getting reflected back from the reflector, and then you are doing the counting of the components moving on the conveyor. I'll just go ahead. I'll come to that process part in later part. I'll just start off with the encoders, right? So again, devices that are used for converting mechanical rotation into RPM, angle, or they give electrical pulses. We use rotary encoders for that. Now, what is a rotary encoder? It is a device that has a shaft. As the shaft rotates, there is a disc inside it, and it gives pulses, right? Now, there are two types of rotary encoders: incremental encoders, absolute. Can anybody explain me the difference between both? What is the difference between an incremental encoder and an absolute encoder?
Each position is unique in itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like a gray code encoder, that is the absolute encoder.
Okay.
And incremental, you need to have a reference beforehand from where it has started. Each position is not
Each
unique.
position amplify. Each position incremental sense.
Last position becomes reference for the next one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's say potentiometer is an absolute encoder because it starts from 0 volt to 5 volt, from here to here.
Mm-hmm.
So each position can uniquely identify its position starting from 0. But let's say the disk which you showed with the different black and white slots in it was an incremental encoder. It cannot store its absolute zero phase. Anytime it starts from its own position you have to record.
Right. It's somewhat same thing only. Increment encoder, it consists of a disk, right? Now, if you have an incremental encoder, you do not know the zero position. That means in case of a power failure, you have to go back to the home position to start again. But in case of an absolute encoder, you will get the same position after power failure as it was before that. That means you don't need to go back to your reference position. Clear? So incremental encoder is only giving you the position or the pulses. It's not giving you the exact position. That pulses have to be stored inside the PLC, and based on that you calculate the distance it traveled. But if the power is failed, that means you have to go back to the zero position or the home position and then start counting the pulses again, which is not the case in case of absolute encoders. So if we talk about encoders, these are different types of resolutions. We have hollow shaft, solid shaft, recessed shaft. These are all because of the mechanical structure. Hollow shaft, that means you can put the shaft or the motor inside it. Recessed is again a similar concept. Solid shaft, that means you need to have a coupling between the motor shaft and the encoder shaft. As the motor rotates, the encoder shaft rotates and we get pulses. So this is how a normal encoder looks like. This is a photodiode. This is a shaft on which is a slotted disc is there, and there is a photodetector assembly that is receiving the light. As the disc rotates, it gets pulses. The diode on the other top gets pulses. It gets on and off, and we get pulses in the form.
How do you detect the direction of rotation?
Sir, I'll just come to that. So inside the encoder, there are one assembly for this. Now, as we rotate, there are different channels for it. We call this as an A channel. That means if there is only rotation in one axis, we do not know the direction of rotation. That means we can only count the pulses. We can measure the RPM or the angle. Now, for measuring the direction, there are two channels. That means there are two photodiode assemblies inside it. One is there is a phase shift of 90 degrees between the two. that means A is leading B, that means it's rotating in clockwise direction. If B is leading A, that means it's rotating in anti-clockwise direction. So if you can see, this is the concept. Every encoder may have these two channels plus a zero channel, which we call as a home channel. Right? So this is the marker pulse or the zero position pulse, and these are the two channels which are based on the number of pulses. So for clockwise or anti-clockwise, we require both these channels which are at a phase shift of 90 degrees. And for homing, that means, as I said, in case of power failure, either you have to go to a mechanical stopper or you have to rotate the encoder to a position where you get the third channel pulse. This is known as the zero channel pulse. So अगर आपने एक encoder को rotate किया and you have moved a distance of 10 mm and there is a power failure, you have to move in an anti-clockwise direction so that you can reach the C channel or the zero channel pulse or a marker pulse, right? Which is not the case with absolute encoders. Again, since there is a possibility of noise interfering, each of these three channels, they have a complementary output. That means all the three with the opposite outputs. So this helps to reduce the noise. So these are some of the applications. It's used basically in windmills. Any motor, any device that is having a motor or any rotating system will always have an encoder for measurement of speed, angle, positioning, distance, anything. Now if we talk about absolute encoders, and absolute encoder also has a disk. This is a disk of the absolute encoder. These are different bits. Bit 0, bit 1, bit 2, bit 3, because we know absolute encoders have working on the principle of bits, binary. So if a singleton encoder is there, you have 16 bits. If you have a multi-ton, it has a total of 30 bits. So in case of power failure, either of these bits are 0 or 1. So when the power comes back, the same 0 and 1 position are always maintained. So that's why we do not need to go back to the home position. Again, there are two types: single turn, multi-turn. That means in one turn, the encoder will reset. You have to restart all over again. In multi-turn, that means you can go up to number of turns. The total number of turns are 14 bits. So you can go up to 16,384 number of turns before the encoder resets to 0. So this is an actual picture of a disk of an encoder for absolute encoder. Again, a multi-turn encoder, it has a gear assembly, so that after one turn also the encoder can still take 16,000 turns before it resets. Again, housing wise, it's same mechanical, it can be coupled directly to a hollow shaft or a normal. This is what you said, sir, binary and gray code. In case of binary, there are more than one bits that are changing, but in case of gray code, only one bit will change from one position to the next position. So that there is a possibility of noise that can obstruct in case of binary, but in case of gray code, since only one bit is changing, noise does not interfere. I will just show you a couple of videos. So this is an example of automatic storage and retrieval. These are storage racks, and we have this forklift. Now it has to move from one floor to the other floor to store the racks. So encoder has mounted on the forklift. So as the shaft moves up and down, we get the position. Again, same encoder being used in automotive industry. Now this is an assembly that can be connected to an encoder. There are certain applications which require you to measure linear distances, but you are not dependent on the mechanical system for that. So you can couple this device to an encoder. This is called as a cable pull device. So it has got a metallic cable which is spring loaded. It is attached to an encoder. As you pull this cable, the encoder also rotates and it gives you the same pulses.
Self-diagnostics and fail-safe. Suppose the sensor fails, what happens? What are the fail-safe measures which are taken? Otherwise, a severe accident can result.
Sir, in case of fail-safe, what happens is, suppose you are using sensor in NO mode, automatically fail-safe sensor will give you a, will go back to its normal mode condition, that is of
It's stay put, it goes into a stay put condition.
Yes, stay put condition, yes.
it is alarmed, the sensor.
So that output can be taken and it can be used as an alarm. The sensor will fall.
For example, in a manufacturing process, there are various sensors. Are all the sensors connected together by a bus, which then gives a central alarming system or not?
Allow me. There are different criticality levels in a plant, as you would know, and the generic operations. In case of safety concerns, we generally end up with 4-wire sensors. In which case, a normally open output may be chosen to work on the operation, and NC's output, normally closed output, is used as an interlock, and these are sequentially chained, so that along the whole line, if any normally closed due to accidental conditions opens up, the interlock goes into a shutdown mode. So criticality level low, we don't use that. Criticality level medium, we use NONC output together. In very critical operations, you have special sensors with fail-safe output, so that under failure conditions, the sensor will acquire the most safe programmed condition, and these are usually reverse logic. They are mostly NC, and they are all sequentially chained. In that case, even the PLCs and the other apparatus is turned to a shutdown system, which we call as a ESD, emergency shutdown, in case of criticality level and accident condition. And most of these, you have criticality levels of generic, safety category 2 and safety category 4. Safety category 4 is highest. So the components, the PCB, the ingress protection, the level of redundancies and such are also along the way.
So this is the last portion. This just take another 2 minutes. Now, as I said, encoders, they have a rotatory disc. Now, in case of linear positioning, we are not using a rotary disc, we are using a rail. This is again a slotted rail, and this is a head that is moving on top of it, so that you can take linear positions. So I will just show you a couple of videos of this before we close. So for overhead cranes, you need to do the positioning, so that you are picking the component from one position and placing it on exactly at the same position. So this is a mechanical rail that is being connected, and this is the head that is moving on top of it, and it will give you absolute position. It is similar to an absolute encoder, because in case of the power failure, it gives you the absolute position when the power comes back. It is not going to restart, or you do not need to go back to the home position. Again, same concept. This is the, instead of a disc, it is a rail. Again, I have another video of this same product. So these are all for linear positioning. This is an ASRS, automatic storage and retrieval system. So you have two axes of movement, X as well as Y. So you need to do the positioning of the storage system both on X and Y axis. So this is the head which is giving the absolute position.
And just on the output part, because the PLC.
Okay. Now, because this is giving the positions, it cannot be a digital output. So it is on the communication bus. So the communication can either be RS485, it can be Profibus, DeviceNet, Ethernet, any type of network that we say, we get an output on this device. One of the last 2 videos. This is again a dipping system which called as a galvanizing plant. In automotive industry or any type of metal industry, the component has to be dipped into different tanks. Maybe some tanks may have some acid or some chemicals, then water, then basic chemicals. For that dipping, or we call this galvanizing, we have different transporters. That is 2 components, one is being carried from this location to this, then this to the third location. So multiple heads moving on a single rail and doing dipping at different tanks.
One question, why can't we have a normal encoder here? We can, as Sudhanshu said, we can have a cable pull system, linear to rotary conversion, and put a normal rotary encoder in a chemical plant.
Maybe that vapor may damage those.
Thank you. Because in whatever positioning system or sensor systems you may tend to use, the possibility of any media being used is definitely good. It should theoretically work. But in industrial sensing, the plethora of sensors are so oriented because it has to suit the particular environment, manufacturing environment, for which it has to work. Because in this case, whatever might be the case, the rail is not going to get destroyed. If you have a mechanical issue, you can take a SS ray. But if you have a chemical issue, you can have a polymer rail which is also coated so that any amount of vapor, you still get the same positions. So, we may talk about vision sensors.
Yes,
That's essential. Everybody is very
and any secondary sensors. These were all primary sensors. So vision sensors or form sensors, those pattern sensors.
Vision system basically consists of camera based system. There is a light, again then there is a software attached to it, and certain sensors for triggering. Right? That means you have to have a component that as the sensor triggers the vision system, the light tries to take the image. Now what happens is that image is broken into small pixels. Each of the pixel has a grayscale value. Those pixels are then grayscale values are stored inside the memory of the camera, and it is now comparing the real-time images with 1:1 pixelized. So these gray pixels can be either, if you are using a monochrome or a normal color camera, it can be grayscale. Black and white camera, it can be a grayscale value. If you are using a color camera, it can be the RGB content of each of the pixels. Now, all vision system or all vision cameras are totally dependent on the type of software that is doing the calculations or pixelating the image and doing the image processing, right? So, if we talk, these are the basic components. As I said, this is a camera with a lighting system. Some cameras, they have an inbuilt light. Certain cameras you need to have an external lighting. Now, lighting is an important factor because based on the lighting effects, you can the image can get changed. If you cannot use a camera with a normal light in an open environment, because as the day changes from morning to evening, the atmospheric light changes. So, all vision systems, they are enclosed inside a small box, and you are providing artificial lights and then using a normal vision based camera with that. Secondly, if the image is captured and it is broken down, now how do we do the calculations or do we do the processing of the images? It is totally dependent on the camera or on the software. The software tool that is supposed to take the image, breaking it into other pixels and capturing and processing those pixels. So, software of the camera is again a secondary point, that is what most important factor in doing the processing. Then lastly, you have the communication part. Either the camera will give you a digital output, good, bad, or it can also give you the image as well as the values of the each of the pixels. Like field of view is a very common thing that is being used. That means the area which a vision camera is capturing. Based on that field of view, what are the things that are need to be monitored or measured to check its presence or to measure its dimensions, anything. Now that within that field of view, you have to adjust the focal length, so that the images do not blur out. It's giving you a crisp picture of that image of the component, and those different components are then taken to the software, and there are different tools for doing it. There is a common tool that is known as a pattern tool that matches the pattern, 1:1 matching of the pattern. Then there is a tool which is known as an edge tool, which compares the contrast value to detect the presence. So, these are different tools which are totally dependent on the software of the camera.
You run a video so that people just get an idea how it works.
So, this is just a small video. So, this is just an example of a video which shows that this is a PCB machine which is having number of PCBs mounted on it. Now this is a PCB which is supposed to be checked for its pattern. If the PCB is broken, if there is a damage, that means the image comparison is happening. So, the same PCB is not getting, we are not getting the same result, the pixels value are changing. So, based on that it is being rejected from the line. So, this is pattern comparison. Then second example of this is, again it is matching the different that the box should have all the 6 PCBs inside it. So, it is taking the picture of 6 different tools, that is within that field of view you are teaching the camera for 6 different components in one time. So, if even either of the outputs are not there, that means you can do ANDing as well as ORing through the software, that means this and this and this, all this should be present, then only an output should be generated, or either or anything.
Maybe all of them are present but one is faulty, then also it will.
Exactly, ma'am. So, this is again matching, it is checking the presence of that image, if that image is there or not. Now, this is just a common example of how a vision system is used in industry. I will show you a couple of more videos just to show how vision can be used for different applications rather than just a simple automotive plant. Now, again this is an application of a collating machine, right. Books formation hoti hai, there are different pages. So, these are different stacks and each of the pages has to be placed on the top of other book and then they are formed into a book at the end of this machine. So, again vision cameras are mounted on each of those images and they are taking the picture of the complete page or a portion of that page. So, now this is the pattern that has been taught to the camera. Now, every time this pattern comes, that means the stack is having the same paper. If there is a change in the paper, it will give a different output. So, it can distinguish between different styles, contrast values and paper. So, both the images are same, that means it is a good output, that means now the gripper can pick.
The original picture in its memory?
Is in the memory, yeah. There are certain cameras you can show one image, there are cameras where you can show more than 100 images, 1000 images, and then through software or through digital inputs you trigger which image to load.
So, it does the major image processing also?
Yes, yes. So, again this vision camera is used to read the.
That is how to do the signature verification also?
Yes, ma'am.
That is one application.
Yeah. So, it can also use to read 1D codes, 2D codes. Again vision system, last video I will just show you. Again a vision system used for positioning. You must have seen material handling is one of the most important aspects in any industry, that is the material has to be transported from one place to the other. Now, AGVs are most commonly used, that means unmanned vehicle to carry the material from one location to the other location. So, it can be compared to a similar sort of a thing like a line runner. There is a line that is on the floor of the factory and there is a vision system which is following that line. You can have different type of lines, then you can have some contrast, you can have some control codes which can be, that is a 2D matrix code or a barcode which a vision system will read, and then based on that the PLC will decide whether to take a left turn or a right turn. So, this is a vision system, this is reading that line, and now how away from the center is it, it will give the position to the PLC and the PLC will do the auto correction. And this is the control code that can be pasted on different parts. So, as it reads the control code, then it decides whether to take a left turn or to go straight. So, this means for example, for this PLC it was supposed to take a right turn. So, it has a control code says 13 number. So, if it is 13 number, that means it has to take a right, if it says nothing, it has to go straight. So, these are also vision systems with camera based systems, again using the same concept, but in a different pattern. So, this is suppose this is the thickness of the tape. So, how away is it from the center of that tape? So, this can give you the position. So, you can control the steering system of that AGV. So this was all on vision systems. Maybe if we can in the lab session we can have something or discuss on RFID.